The hum of the Stardust Drifter's recycled atmosphere scrubbers was the only sound Kalen had trusted for the last 10 years. It was a low, guttural rattle, the sound of a machine that had been taken apart and put back together so many times that its original factory signature was a long-forgotten ghost. It was a sound of survival. Now, that sound was drowned out by the silent, terrifying elegance of the ships that had just appeared on his long-range scanner. They didn't roar into the Viridia system. They simply arrived, materializing from the void like ghosts of polished chrome and ambient light. The Athelian hegemony. Kalen felt the blood drain from his face, his knuckles turning white where he gripped the worn console of his salvage hauler. The drifter was ugly, a flying contradiction held together by pragmatism and second-hand welds. Its hull was a patchwork quilt of different alloys, scarred by micrometeoroids and the corrosive touch of deep space salvage. It was built to be functional, not beautiful. The hegemony ships were the opposite. They were seamless, flowing works of art that moved with a liquid grace. Their forms so perfect they seemed to repel the very chaos of space, a fleet of razors in a universe of blunt instruments. They arranged themselves in a perfect orbital sphere around Viridia, the small, terraformed moon his sister called home. And then they did nothing but exist, their presence a suffocating weight on the entire system. A message, broadcast on all open channels, soon followed. It wasn't a declaration of war. It was worse. The voice was calm, melodic, and utterly devoid of emotion. Speaking flawless Terran standard, it spoke of humanity's chaotic technological footprint, of the discordant frequencies of human engineering, and of the hegemony's benevolent intention to bring harmony and aesthetic purity to the system. They called it a quarantine of benevolence. They would allow no ships in or out. The colony on Viridia, with its mismatched prefabs and clunky, inefficient fusion generators, was an offense to their sensibilities. The colonists were to dismantle their blight, surrender their technology base, and await guidance toward a more orderly existence. The message ended with a simple, chilling statement: embrace harmony or be silenced by it. Silence was their weapon. They didn't need to fire a shot. The colony only had 3 months of stored food and medical supplies. Kalen watched on his screen as Viridia's tiny colonial defense fleet, 3 repurposed asteroid miners with gun turrets bolted on as an afterthought, powered up to challenge the blockade. It was a pathetic, heroic gesture. The hegemony didn't even bother with weapons. A shimmering, golden web of energy erupted from their lead cruiser, expanding in a silent, inexorable wave. The colonial ships were caught in it, their engines sputtering, their weapons dying, their lights flickering out as if they were children's toys whose batteries had been removed. The web held them there, suspended and helpless, a museum exhibit of human folly. His comms unit crackled with a final, desperate burst from the moon before the hegemony's jamming field descended. Blockade is absolute. Elara, if you can hear this, I love. The voice cut out, leaving only static. Elara, his sister, the brilliant, stubborn engineer who had turned down a cushy corporate job on Mars to help build something new on Viridia. She was down there on that little rock, slowly suffocating under a blanket of alien perfection. Rage, cold and sharp, pierced through Kalen's fear. He was a scrapper, a hauler of cosmic junk. He ran from fights. He didn't pick them. The drifter's only defenses were its thick hull and oversized engines, designed to outrun pirates or angry claim jumpers, not to fight a fleet of technologically superior zealots. A direct assault was suicide, but as he stared at the tactical display, at the perfect, predictable sphere of the Ithilian blockade, an idea began to form, born not of courage, but of a scavenger's intimate knowledge of the overlooked and discarded. The hegemony ships were positioned for threats coming from deep space, from the orbital plane. Their sensors, he reasoned, must be calibrated for clarity, for the clean vacuum between worlds. They were looking for warships, for missiles, for things that behaved as expected. They wouldn't be looking down. They wouldn't be looking into the swirling, chaotic hell of the gas giant that Viridia orbited. The planet, a colossal ball of roiling hydrogen and metallic storms called Typhon, was a navigational nightmare. Its upper atmosphere was a tempest of winds that could tear a frigate apart, and its magnetic field was so violent it made sensors scream with phantom signals. For years, Kalen had made a living dancing on the edge of that nightmare, salvaging the wrecks of prospectors foolish enough to get too close. He knew its currents, its dead zones, its pockets of relative calm hidden within the chaos. The hegemony's perfection was their weakness. They would never, in their ordered, logical minds, conceive of a plan that involved voluntarily flying a ship into the heart of that storm. He wasn't a soldier, but he was a survivor, and he knew how to use junk to his advantage. First, though, he needed a crew as broken and desperate as his plan. He turned the drifter away from Viridia, its engines rumbling a protest as he pushed them toward the system's asteroid belt, toward the one place the hegemony would never bother to look, a hollowed-out asteroid known only as the Rust Bucket. It was a haven for smugglers, exiles, and outcasts, a grimy, lawless outpost that was the antithesis of everything the hegemony stood for. It was perfect. The docking bay of the Rust Bucket smelled of ozone, unrecycled air, and cheap synthale. Kalen found Zeth in his usual corner of the grimiest cantina, hunched over a flickering datapad, his long, elegant Athelian fingers a stark contrast to his stained human mechanics jumpsuit tracing complex energy schematics. Zeth was a pariah, an Athelian engineer exiled for the crime of believing that imperfection had its uses, that true innovation came from chaos, not rigid adherence to design. He had tried to integrate salvaged tech from other races into hegemony systems, a heresy that had earned him a one-way trip to the galactic fringe. "They're here, Zeth," Kalen said, sliding into the booth without preamble. Zeth didn't look up. "I saw the light show. So pure. So sterile. They will scrub this system clean of every interesting mistake. My sister is on Viridia," Kalen stated flatly. For the first time, Zeth's luminous, silver eyes lifted from the datapad. They held a deep, ancient sadness. "Then your sister is already a memory. The hegemony does not negotiate. It perfects. It erases." "I'm going in," Kalen said. Through Typhon, Zeth's eyes widened, a flicker of something not hope, but professional curiosity igniting in their depths. The atmospheric pressure would crush your ship like a tin can. The radiation would fry your systems in minutes. The gravimetric shears would— "You can fix that," Kalen interrupted. "You told me once that hegemony heat, sinks, and structural integrity fields were over-designed, that they could withstand 10 times their rated tolerance if you bypass the safety protocols." Zeth leaned back, a slow, dangerous smile spreading across his thin lips. "Bypassing safety protocols is what got me exiled. Prelate Xylar himself called my work an abomination of asymmetrical engineering. You want to turn your freighter into an abomination." "I want to turn it into a ghost," Kalen replied. "A ghost that can survive hell." Finding his pilot was easier. Anya was in the fighting pits, a whirlwind of furious motion as she dismantled a hulking cyborg twice her size. She moved with a desperate, self-destructive energy, her dark hair plastered to her forehead with sweat, her eyes burning with a rage that never seemed to cool. She fought not for credits, but for the burn, for the one thing that could quiet the ghosts of her past. Her family had been on a colony pacified by the hegemony a decade ago. She was the only survivor. When Kalen explained his plan, she didn't hesitate. "You want to weaponize your salvage gear?" she asked, her voice a low growl as she wiped blood from her lip. "Your primary cutting laser, if you overload the focusing array, could theoretically punch through a cruiser's kinetic barriers at close range. And your tractor beam, if we could modify it to launch instead of pull, it's a suicide run. Anya," Kalen warned. "Good," she hissed. "I've been looking for a good way to die for a long time. Taking some of those glowing bastards with me sounds like a bonus." And so, the work began. In a shielded, forgotten corner of the Rust Bucket's maintenance bay, the Stardust Drifter was reborn. Zeth, working with a feverish intensity he hadn't felt in years, began weaving salvaged hegemony technology into the Drifter's crude human systems. He bypassed every safety governor, rerouted power conduits, and bolted on articulated heat sinks that made the ship look like a metallic, winged beast. He turned the hull into a layered composite of ablative armor and jury-rigged energy baffles, creating a grotesque but functional shield against the fury of Typhon. Meanwhile, Anya and Kalen worked on the weapons. They stripped the safety limiters from the industrial-grade cutting beam, turning it into an unstable but devastatingly powerful lance that could only be fired for a few seconds before it threatened to melt its own housing. They recalibrated the tractor beam, turning it into a gravitic catapult capable of flinging chunks of asteroid debris at incredible speeds. Kalen felt a knot of unease in his stomach. He was a hauler, a smuggler. He moved things. He didn't destroy them. But every time he looked at the dead comms channel from Viridia, he pushed the feeling down and kept working. Days blurred into a frantic cycle of welding, coding, and arguing. The Drifter transformed from a simple freighter into something monstrous, a chimera of competing design philosophies. It was ugly, asymmetrical, and probably lethal to its own crew. An embodiment of the very technological chaos the hegemony sought to erase. Zeth called it his masterpiece of beautiful imperfection. On the 10th day, a grim message filtered through the Rust Bucket's network. The hegemony's patience was wearing thin. They had cut the colony's power. Life support on Viridia was now running on emergency batteries. They had days, maybe less. There was no more time. Kalen stood on the bridge of the transformed Drifter, the air thick with the smell of hot metal and ozone. Anya was strapped into the pilot's seat, her hands hovering over the controls, her knuckles white. Zeth monitored a dozen new consoles, his silver eyes darting back and forth, tracking the ship's screaming vital signs. "She's unstable, Kalen," Zeth warned, his voice tight. "The power core is redlining just sitting here. The moment we enter Typhon's gravity well, every system on this ship will be at war with every other system. Just get us through the storm," Kalen said, his own voice steadier than he felt. He looked at the main view screen, at the distant, serene marble of Viridia, and the perfect deadly cage built around it. On the bridge of the Athelian flagship, the harmonious intent. Prelate Xylar observed the dying moon with detached satisfaction. The human resistance was crumbling, just as his models predicted. Order was being restored. A subordinate approached. "Prelate, the last unregistered human vessel in the system, a junk hauler class, has just broken orbit from the asteroid belt. Xylar didn't turn. Its trajectory, erratic, prelate. It's accelerating directly toward the gas giant, Typhon. Its engines are flaring wildly. It appears to be coming apart. Xylar made a small gesture of dismissal, a final, pointless act of desperation. Their chaotic nature leads them to self-destruction. Note it in the log and erase its signature from our board. It is irrelevant. Far below, the Stardust Drifter, the irrelevant piece of junk, screamed defiance at the indifferent void. It bucked and shuddered as Kalen gave the order. "Take us in, Anya. Full burn." The ship didn't accelerate toward the enemy fleet. It turned its ugly, scarred nose downward and plunged like a falling stone, straight into the swirling, violent clouds of the gas giant, vanishing from a universe of clean lines and perfect spheres into a realm of pure chaos. It was a place no sane pilot would ever go. It was the only place they could be invisible. The transition from the void to Typhon's atmosphere was not a gentle one. It was a physical assault. One moment, the Stardust Drifter was falling through silent, empty space. The next, it was seized by an invisible hand and shaken with bone-jarring violence. The low hum of the ship was instantly replaced by a deafening, high-pitched scream as superheated gases scoured the hull. Red alerts flashed across every console, bathing the bridge in a hellish crimson light. Kalen was thrown against his restraints, his teeth clacking together. On the view screen, the serene starscape was gone, replaced by a chaotic maelstrom of swirling ochre clouds and lightning flashes the size of continents. "Hull temperature is spiking past all known tolerances," Szeth yelled, his voice strained, his elegant fingers flying across his controls in a desperate ballet. "The heat sinks are glowing cherry red. I'm diverting coolant from the life support systems to compensate." The air on the bridge immediately grew thin and hot, the smell of ozone sharp and suffocating. Anya, however, seemed to come alive in the chaos. Her knuckles were white on the flight yoke, but her eyes were narrowed with a feral focus. She wasn't just piloting the ship, she was wrestling with it, her body moving in sync with every lurch and shudder, anticipating the planet's violent currents. "She fights like a cornered animal," Anya grunted, a grim smile touching her lips. "I can respect that." The Drifter groaned, a deeply resonant sound of tortured metal that seemed to come from the ship's very soul. "Gravimetric shear ahead," Szeth shouted, pointing a trembling finger at a cascade of distorted data on his screen. "Multiple conflicting gravity wells. It will tear us apart." On the screen, the storm clouds seemed to ripple, pulling in on themselves before exploding outward. Anya didn't wait for orders. She slammed a lever forward, shunting all available power to the maneuvering thrusters. The ship screamed in protest as it was forced into a tight, corkscrewing dive. Kalen felt his stomach lurch as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, his body suddenly feeling twice as heavy, then light as a feather. He watched as a massive, dark shape, a chunk of frozen ammonia the size of a small moon, was caught in the shear they had just dodged. The colossal iceberg twisted, warped, and then shattered into a million pieces with a silent, terrible finality. They had missed that fate by meters. "Thrusters are overheating," Anya barked, her voice tight with strain. "I'm losing attitude control." "It's the Athelian integrity field," Szeth gasped, sweat beading on his high forehead. "My modifications, they are holding, but they are fighting the ship's original human design. The entire frame is vibrating at a harmonic that could cause catastrophic structural failure." He began furiously typing, his face illuminated by the glow of his console. "I have to harmonize the frequencies, but it requires a full system reboot of the power core for 3 seconds. 3 seconds of total darkness, of dead silence, in the heart of a storm that could tear them to shreds. It was insane. Kalen looked at Anya. She met his gaze, her dark eyes blazing with a fatalistic fire. "Do it," she said, her hands never leaving the yoke. "Make it quick." Kalen nodded at Szeth. "Do it." Szeth took a deep breath and slapped a large, unguarded switch. Instantly, everything died. The roar of the storm, the shriek of the engines, the blaring alarms all vanished, replaced by a profound, terrifying silence. The emergency lights failed to kick in. They were adrift, a dead husk tumbling through the belly of the beast. The only sound was the creak of the hull and their own ragged breathing in the dark. It was the longest 3 seconds of Kalen's life. He thought of Alara, of her bright, hopeful face the last time he'd seen her, talking about the gardens they were building under Viridia's biodomes. He was doing this for her, and he was going to die in the dark without ever knowing if she was safe. Then, with a convulsive shudder, the power came back on. The lights flickered, the consoles rebooted, and the roar of the engines returned, deeper and more stable than before. The crimson alerts were replaced by a cascade of amber warnings. "It worked," Szeth cried, a note of manic triumph in his voice. "The vibrations have stabilized." She's holding together. Anya was already fighting the controls, pulling the drifter out of its uncontrolled tumble. "We lost a lot of altitude," she reported, her voice calm again. "But we're through the worst of the upper atmosphere. Welcome to the deep." The view outside changed. The roiling clouds gave way to a strange, dark sea. They were flying through liquid hydrogen, the pressure outside so immense it defied comprehension. Strange, bioluminescent energy forms, native to the gas giant's depths, drifted past the viewport like ghostly leviathans. The lightning here was different, moving in slow, deliberate sheets of blue and violet. "Now for the real problem," Szeth said, his voice dropping. "The radiation down here is off the charts. It's playing hell with the sensors. I can't get a clear reading. We're flying blind." Anya grunted. "Good thing I fly by feel." Kalen watched the tactical display. Szeth was right. It was a mess of phantom signals and sensor ghosts. They were supposed to be navigating toward a specific isochronous layer, a pocket of relative calm that would allow them to traverse the planet and emerge on the other side, right under the hegemony fleet. But without sensors, finding that layer was impossible. They were lost. It was then that a new alarm, a low, pulsing proximity warning, began to chime. "What is that?" Kalen asked. "Is it real?" "The signature is solid," Szeth confirmed, his brow furrowed. "It's big and metallic." On the forward screen, a shape began to resolve itself out of the gloom. It was a ship, or what was left of one, an old Terran prospector, its hull breached and twisted, encrusted with strange crystalline formations from the planet's core. It was a ghost ship, a relic trapped in the deep for decades. But that wasn't what triggered the alarm. The prospector was embedded in something else, a colossal, slowly spinning mass of something. "Metallic hydrogen," Szeth breathed, his voice filled with awe and terror. "It solidified under the pressure. It's an iceberg, Kalen, a solid metal iceberg, and it's directly in our path." "Can we go around it?" Kalen demanded. Anya shook her head, her eyes glued to the screen. "It's too big, and its magnetic field is pulling us in. We can't break orbit." They were trapped. being drawn slowly but surely toward a collision that would crush the drifter into a microscopic speck. Kalen's mind raced. They had no weapons that could damage something so massive. Retreat wasn't an option. They were out of choices. He looked at his console, at the readouts for the salvage equipment, the cutting laser, the one they'd overloaded, the tractor beam, the one they'd reversed, junk, tools. Anya, he said slowly, an idea taking shape, born of a decade of taking things apart. How close can you get us to that old prospector wreck? Anya glanced at him, a flicker of understanding in her eyes. Close enough to scratch the paint, if it had any left. Why? Zeth, can you give me full power to the cutting laser on my mark unshielded? Raw power, just for a second. It will melt the emitter, Zeth protested. The feedback could blow out the entire forward section of the ship. Just do it, Kalen commanded. He strapped himself in tighter, his heart hammering against his ribs. This was more than a long shot. It was insanity. Anya, get ready with the grav catapult. Target the prospector's engine core. You're crazy, she said, but she was already keying in the coordinates, a wild grin on her face. I like it. The drifter crept closer to the derelict, the metallic iceberg looming like a mountain range behind it. The ship's lights played over the prospector's ruined hull, revealing the deep, sorrowful wounds that had sent it to its grave. Now, Zeth, Kalen yelled. Zeth slammed his hand down on the console. A blinding, pure white beam of energy, far more powerful than it was ever designed to be, erupted from the front of the drifter. It wasn't a precise cut. It was a brute force blast. The beam struck the prospector's ancient, shielded reactor casing. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a flash of light that momentarily whited out the view screen, the old reactor, dormant for half a century, went critical. Now, Anya, Kalen roared. Anya fired the gravitic catapult. Instead of a tractor beam pulling the wreck in, a massive wave of gravitic force slammed into it, pushing it away. The prospector, now a makeshift bomb with a cracking core, was launched forward like a stone from a sling. It shot across the small gap and embedded itself deep within the metallic hydrogen iceberg. A few seconds of silence followed. Then, the iceberg began to glow from within. A web of cracks spread across its surface, and with a silent, convulsive explosion, the prospector's core detonated. The shock wave, a ripple in the liquid hydrogen, slammed into the drifter, tossing it back like a child's toy. Alarms screamed, but they were holding. In front of them, the once solid iceberg had been fractured into a dozen smaller pieces, revealing a clear path through the center. Go, Kalen shouted, his voice hoarse. Go now! Anya didn't need to be told twice. She pushed the engines to their limit, piloting the battered drifter through the newly formed channel, dodging floating chunks of solid metal. On the bridge of the Harmonious Intent, a junior sensor technician noted a faint, symmetrical energy burst from deep within Typhon. Prelate Xylar, he reported dutifully. An anomalous reading. A focused energy release, followed by a contained fission reaction. Xylar glanced at the data, his lip curling in disdain. The primitives on that moon used to send probes into the giant. One of them has finally succumbed to the pressure. It is the sound of chaos consuming itself. See? Erase the reading. It is an impurity in our data. The technician complied, and the hegemony fleet remained in its perfect, ignorant formation. As the Stardust drifter cleared the debris field, Zeth pointed to his screen. There, he said, his voice filled with exhausted relief. The isochronous layer. The eye of the storm. We made it. The violent turbulence subsided, replaced by a smooth, steady calm. They had found their secret passage. The ship was a wreck. Half its systems were offline, and it was leaking atmosphere from a dozen minor breaches. But it was functional. Kalen looked at the main screen. The swirling clouds of Typhon began to thin, and through the haze, he could see it. The dark curve of Viridia, and hanging above it, silent and unaware, was the underbelly of the Athelian fleet. Their cannons were pointed outward, into space, expecting an attack from a fleet. They weren't looking down. They never thought anyone would be mad enough to come up from hell itself. The easy part was over. The ascent from Typhon's embrace was as eerie as the descent had been violent. Within the isochronous layer, the ship moved with an unnatural smoothness, gliding on a current of stable pressure between the raging storms above and below. The view screen showed a universe of deep, velvety purple, occasionally lit by the distant, silent flashes of mega lightning in the lower atmosphere. It was a place of profound, alien beauty, a secret road hidden beneath the apocalypse. The quiet on the bridge was a fragile thing, stretched taut by adrenaline and exhaustion. Szeth was coaxing the ship's battered systems back to a state of grudging cooperation, his face a mask of intense concentration. Anya, her hands resting lightly on the controls, guided the drifter upward with a pilot's instinct, feeling the subtle shifts in the current. Kalen watched the tactical display, his heart a cold, heavy knot in his chest. As they rose, the sensor ghosts began to resolve into solid, terrifying shapes. The Athelian fleet, dozens of them, cruisers, destroyers, and at the center, the flagship, the Harmonious Intent, a vessel so large it seemed to bend the very fabric of space around it. They were seeing the fleet as no enemy ever had from directly underneath, a perspective of complete vulnerability. "They're still not seeing us," Szeth whispered, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Typhon's magnetic field is still providing perfect cover. To them, we're just another pocket of atmospheric radiation." "Their carriers are exposed," Anya noted, her voice a low, hungry growl. She pointed to a cluster of smaller, sleeker ships nestled close to the flagship. "Those are their fighter deployment bays, no shields on the ventral side. Arrogant bastards." Kalen's plan had been simple: get through the storm, hit them where they were weakest, and create enough chaos for a single, desperate transmission to get through the jamming field, a plea for help to the nearest Terran Alliance outpost, a message of defiance to show the galaxy that Viridia hadn't died in silence. But looking at the sheer scale of the fleet, at the cold, perfect geometry of their formation, the plan felt like throwing a pebble at a mountain. "We get one shot at this," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "One clean shot before they know we exist. We hit the carriers, take out their fighter support, and then we run." Szeth shook his head slowly. "Even if we destroy all the carriers, the main fleet will obliterate us in seconds. We cannot outrun their weapons." "We don't have to outrun them," Kalen replied, a grim finality in his voice. "We just have to make them move." He looked at Anya. "Can you target the gravitic catapult on the debris from that command ship? They crippled the one from the Colonial Defense Fleet." A dark, predatory smile spread across Anya's face as she understood. "You magnificent son of a bitch! You want to throw their own failures back in their faces. The hegemony values perfection," Kalen said, his eyes fixed on the flagship. "Let's give them a taste of chaos." "Szeth, I need you to time this perfectly. We fire the laser at the lead carrier. Then Anya launches the debris. While they're reacting to the two separate impacts, I need you to find a hole in their jamming field, just a flicker, and push a single compressed data packet through. "What's in the packet?" Zeth asked, already configuring his console for the task. "Everything," Kalen answered. "Your schematics of their system vulnerabilities, Anya's logs of their tactics from her colony, my salvage logs, detailing every piece of hegemony tech I've ever found. It's a poison pill. It won't win the war, but it will give the Alliance a fighting chance." The Stardust drifter broke through the final layer of Typhon's cloud cover like a ghost rising from the grave. For a few precious seconds, they hung there, unseen, directly beneath the belly of the beast. The view was breathtaking. The Athelian ships glowed with a soft, internal luminescence, their hulls etched with intricate patterns that pulsed with power. Above them, Viridia hung in the blackness, a silent, darkened world. "We are in position," Anya said, her voice a low, steady hum. "Targeting solution locked on the carrier Unblemished Dawn." "Laser is at maximum overload," Zeth confirmed, his hand hovering over the firing stud. "The emitter will slag itself, but it will deliver one hell of a punch." "Data packet is compressed and ready for transmission," Kalen said, his own console showing a single green icon. "It's all or nothing. Fire. Anya." The sequence was executed with the desperate precision of a last, dying act. Anya squeezed the trigger. There was no sound, only a blinding flash of white light as the overloaded cutting beam, the repurposed salvage tool, lanced upward. It was a raw, uncontrolled spear of pure energy, flickering and unstable, the very embodiment of the asymmetrical chaos Zeth had been exiled for. The beam struck the Unblemished Dawn on its unshielded ventral side. The hegemony ships were designed to repel kinetic and plasma weapons, their shields calibrated for known threats. They had no defense against a focused, industrial-grade laser that was never meant to be a weapon. The beam didn't explode, it simply cut. It sliced through the carrier's hull as if it were tissue paper, carving a molten path through ammunition stores and fuel lines. For a moment, the ship just hung there, a clean, glowing scar across its belly. Then, it blossomed into a silent, beautiful flower of fire and shrapnel. "Launch the junk," Kalen roared. At the same moment, Anya fired the grav catapult, a cloud of jagged, twisted metal, the remains of Viridia's own fallen defenders, shot upward, propelled by a wave of focused gravity. It was not a precision strike. It was a shotgun blast of wreckage. The debris field slammed into two other carriers, their hulls dented and torn by the impact of their own allies' remains. On the bridge of the Harmonious Intent, confusion reigned for the first time in Prelate Xylar's immaculate military career. "Report," he snapped, his voice tight with controlled fury. "Where did that attack come from?" "Sensors are unclear, Prelate," a technician stammered. "Energy signature originated from beneath us, from the gas giant itself. And the kinetic impacts, they match the debris from the human ships we neutralized." Xylar stared at the tactical display, his multiple eyes narrowing in disbelief. It was impossible. It was illogical. It was imperfect. In that single moment of Athelian confusion, Zeth found his opening. "The jamming field is fluctuating," he shouted. "They're rerouting power to their ventral shields, sending the packet now." Kalen watched the green icon on his screen flash, then disappear. Transmitted. The poison pill was delivered. "They see us," Anya said quietly. Every single ship in the hegemony fleet was turning. their perfect formation breaking as they reoriented to face the impossible threat that had emerged from the storm below. "Time to go," Kalen said, gripping his console. "Anya, get us out of here. Take us back into the storm." "With pleasure," she snarled, and slammed the drifter into a hard dive. But they were too late. A web of golden energy, the same type that had disabled the colonial ships, erupted from the fleet. But this time, it wasn't a gentle net. It was a cage of searing light. The ship screamed as the energy field latched onto it. "Power is failing," Zeth yelled. "They've got us." The Stardust drifter, the ugly, beautiful abomination, was caught. It hung suspended between the enemy fleet and the safety of the storm, completely helpless. On the view screen, Prelate Xylar's face appeared, his features a mask of cold, intellectual rage. His voice, now stripped of its melodic calm, echoed through the drifter's bridge. A chaotic, asymmetrical attack. Illogical, disgusting. He paused, his silver eyes seeming to pierce through the screen, looking directly at Kalen. There is only one author of such technological heresy in this quadrant, Zeth. You will be erased, and your flawed creation will be unmade. The main weapon of the harmonious intent began to glow, a sun-like ball of energy gathering at its prow, a light that promised not just destruction, but total annihilation. This was it. They had delivered their message, but they wouldn't live to see if it was received. Kalen looked at his crew. Zeth was slumped in his chair, a look of weary resignation on his face. Anya was still gripping the controls, her teeth bared in a final, defiant snarl. He thought of Alara, hoping she would somehow know he hadn't abandoned her. He closed his eyes, waiting for the end. But the end didn't come. Instead, a new voice crackled over the comms, a voice that was not Athelian. It was rough, human, and full of tired static. "Stardust Drifter, this is Alliance Cruiser Retribution. We received your data packet. You've got some explaining to do, son." Kalen's eyes snapped open. On the tactical display, a new set of signatures appeared, dropping out of hyperspace right at the edge of the system. Not a fleet, just 3 ships. 3 old, scarred Terran Alliance battlecruisers, relics from a war fought 20 years ago. They were blocky, ugly, and bristling with missile pods and railgun turrets. They were the epitome of humanity's brute force, function over form engineering. They were everything the hegemony despised. Prelate Xylar's face contorted with something that looked almost like surprise. "Impossible. Your fleet is days away." The human captain on the comms laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Turns out we were in the neighborhood, doing a little deep space salvage of our own. Now, I suggest you release that freighter. That piece of junk is now under the protection of the Terran Alliance." The golden energy cage around the drifter flickered and died. Anya didn't hesitate. She slammed the engines to full, diving back toward the swirling safety of Typhon's clouds. The battle for Viridia was not over. In fact, it had just begun. And the Stardust drifter, the flying contradiction, was now caught right in the middle of it. The sanctuary of the storm was short-lived. No sooner had the Stardust drifter plunged back into Typhon's roiling atmosphere than a new, more immediate crisis presented itself. The golden energy cage had done more than just hold them in place. It had supercharged every system on the ship, flooding the delicate, chaotic balance Zeth had created with a raw, unfiltered surge of Athelian power. Sparks rained down from the ceiling conduits like malevolent fireflies. The ship's internal lights flickered between blinding intensity and utter darkness. The power core is going into meltdown, Zeth shouted over a fresh wave of alarms, wrestling with a console that was actively smoking. The Athelian energy introduced a feedback loop I can't contain. It's like pouring gasoline on a chemical fire. We have minutes, maybe less, before the whole ship vaporizes. Can you vent the core? Kalen demanded, his mind struggling to keep up with the cascading failures. Not in the atmosphere, Zeth shot back. The pressure is too high. It would implode before it could vent. Our only chance is to get back to the vacuum of space. It was a death sentence either way. If they stayed in the storm, the drifter would become a miniature sun. If they rose back into the open, they would emerge directly between two warring fleets, a crippled, easy target for both sides. Above them, the battle had been joined. The view screen, flickering between static and clarity, showed a brutal, mismatched ballet of destruction. The three old Alliance cruisers, the Retribution, the Iron Duke, and the Hammerfall, were fighting with a kind of stubborn, ugly tenacity that was uniquely human. They lumbered through space, their thick armor absorbing the hegemony's graceful energy blasts, while they answered with clouds of dumb fire missiles and solid slugs of depleted uranium fired from their railguns. And it wasn't elegant, it was a brawl. The hegemony ships, for all their technological superiority, seemed almost confused by the Terran tactics. They were built for clean, decisive engagements, for overwhelming an enemy with superior shields and precise, powerful energy lances. They weren't built to fight an opponent who treated space combat like a back alley knife fight, firing from the hip and using their own damaged hulls as shields for their sister ships. "They're buying us time," Anya said, her voice a low, awed whisper as she watched a volley of Terran missiles slam into an Athelian cruiser, its perfect shields flaring and then shattering under the sheer, dumb force of the kinetic impacts. "But it won't be enough. That flagship hasn't even fired its main weapon yet." She was right. The harmonious intent was holding back, observing, analyzing. Prelate Xylar was not a brawler. He was a grandmaster. He was letting the Alliance expend their energy before he delivered the killing blow. "We're out of options," Kalen said, the bitter taste of failure in his mouth. They had brought the cavalry, and they were going to die before the real fight even started. "No," Zeth said suddenly, his silver eyes wide with a terrifying, brilliant idea. "No, we are not out of options. We are the option." He pointed a shaking finger at the power core readings, which were now pulsing in a deep, angry red. "Kalen, you wanted a weapon. That feedback loop from the hegemony cage. I can't stop it, but I might be able to direct it." "Direct it where?" Kalen asked. "Outward," Zeth replied, a manic grin spreading across his face. "The salvaged hegemony heat sinks I installed. They were designed to dissipate immense amounts of energy. If I reverse their polarity and bypass every single safety protocol, I can turn the entire hull of this ship into a directed energy emitter. For about a microsecond, the drifter will become a massive, uncontrolled, omnidirectional bomb." "You want us to blow ourselves up?" Anya asked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. "Not just blow up," Zeth corrected, his fingers already flying across his console. "We will release all the pent-up energy from the core in a single chaotic, asymmetrical burst. It will be a wave of pure, unstructured energy. Hegemony shields are tuned to specific frequencies, to predictable patterns. This will be the equivalent of a primal scream. It will be anathema to their technology. It should, theoretically, overload their systems and cause a fleet-wide reboot." "And what happens to us?" Kalen asked, dreading the answer. Zeth's grin faded. The ship will be gutted. The energy discharge will fry every system, and the subsequent core breach will tear the hull apart. Our survival is statistically improbable. Statistically improbable. That was the story of their lives. Kalen looked at the view screen. The Iron Duke was taking a pounding, its port side a mess of molten armor. The hegemony was adapting, their perfect formations shifting to envelop and crush the smaller Terran force. Xylar was done analyzing. He was moving in for the kill. They had no choice. It was this or nothing. "Do it," Kalen said, his voice firm. He keyed his comm unit, patching into the Alliance battle channel. "Cruiser Retribution, this is the Stardust Drifter. Do you read me?" The human captain's voice came back, strained and breathless amidst the sounds of battle. "We read you, Drifter. Bit busy up here. You need to pull your ships back," Kalen said, speaking quickly. "In exactly 90 seconds, we are going to detonate our core. It's going to release an energy pulse that should temporarily disable the hegemony fleet. That will be your opening." There was a moment of stunned silence on the other end. "Son, are you telling me you're turning your rust bucket into a bomb?" "That's the plan," Kalen confirmed. "Just be ready to hit them the second their lights go out. And Captain, if you get the chance, free my sister on Viridia." He didn't wait for a reply, cutting the channel. "Anya, how high can you get us?" Anya's face was pale with hate, but her hands were steady on the yoke, high enough to be the centerpiece of the fireworks. "Strap in, it's going to be a rough climb." With a groan of tortured metal, the drifter clawed its way out of Typhon's atmosphere one last time. It emerged into the heart of the battle, a wounded, smoking beast rising from the depths. Both fleets ceased firing for a split second, their sensors locking onto the impossible ship that refused to die. 40 seconds to discharge," Zeth called out, sweat pouring down his face. The ship was shaking so violently now that the consoles were blurring. "Just get us to the middle of them." Kalen gritted out, his knuckles white on his armrests. The drifter, its hull glowing with a sickening internal heat, limped toward the space between the two fleets. Hegemony energy lances began to streak toward them, but Anya, with a skill that bordered on the supernatural, weaved the dying ship through the incoming fire. 20 seconds, I'm losing containment." "Almost there," Anya muttered, her eyes fixed on the massive, looming form of the Harmonious Intent. She was steering them straight for the flagship. On the bridge of the Harmonious Intent, Prelate Xylar watched the junk hauler's suicidal approach with a cold, analytical curiosity. "What is their objective?" he mused aloud. "Their core is critical. They are a bomb, a crude, inefficient weapon." 10 seconds, Zeth screamed. "Polarity is reversed. All power is routed to the hull emitters." The Stardust Drifter began to glow, a brilliant, pulsating white light. It was no longer a ship. It was a star on the verge of going supernova. "It's been an honor," Anya said, her voice quiet and clear amidst the chaos. Kalen looked at Zeth, who gave him a small, sad smile. He thought of Alara, of a promise to always keep her safe. He closed his eyes. 5, 4, 3, 2. Zeth's countdown was lost in a silent, all-consuming flash of light. From the bridge of the Retribution, which had pulled back to a safe distance, the detonation was a moment of terrible, awe-inspiring beauty. The Stardust Drifter simply vanished, and in its place, a wave of shimmering, chaotic energy expanded outward in a perfect sphere, The wave washed over the Athelian fleet. Their graceful, glowing lights flickered. Their seamless energy shields sputtered and died. Their engines coughed and went silent. For a few precious seconds, the entire hegemony armada, dozens of the most advanced warships in the galaxy, was dead in the water, floating inert and helpless. The energy wave, however, had a different effect on the crude, over-engineered Terran ships. Their lights flickered, their shields buckled, but their heavily shielded, analog-based systems rebooted almost instantly. The Alliance captain didn't waste the gift. His voice, raw with fury and grief, boomed across the battle channel. "All ships, fire at will." What followed was not a battle. It was a slaughter. The Alliance cruisers, now facing a fleet of helpless targets, unleashed everything they had. Missiles streaked across the void, railguns hammered away, and point defense cannons chewed through unshielded hulls. The perfect, beautiful ships of the hegemony broke apart, exploding in silent, fiery blossoms. The harmonious intent, its power systems fried, could only absorb the punishment. The Alliance cruisers focused their fire, tearing into the flagship with a vengeance. And in the heart of the chaos, something small and black tumbled through space. It was the bridge of the Stardust drifter, sheared clean from the rest of the ship an instant before the core detonation. Its emergency life support had kicked in, a final, desperate gasp from a dying machine. Inside, Kaelin, Anya, and Zeth were unconscious, battered, and bleeding, but against all statistical probability, they were alive. Their shattered viewport was filled with the sight of the hegemony fleet being systematically dismantled, a victory bought with the life of their ugly, imperfect, beautiful ship. The first thing Kaelin knew was the low, steady hum of a life support system that didn't rattle. It was a clean, monotonous sound. The sound of brand new parts working in perfect harmony. It was utterly alien to him. He opened his eyes to a world of white. White ceiling panels, white sheets, a white medical monitor beside him beeping softly. The air smelled sterile, filtered, devoid of the familiar, comforting scent of ozone and hot metal that had been his home for a decade. He was alive. He sat up, his body screaming in protest, a symphony of bruised ribs and strained muscles. In the beds next to him lay Anya and Zeth. Anya was pale beneath her tan, her arm in a shimmering blue stasis field, but she was breathing steadily. Zeth looked almost peaceful, his usually furrowed brow smooth in his unconscious state, a network of diagnostic sensors attached to his temples. A figure stepped into his view, blocking the stark white light. She was a woman in a crisp, dark blue Alliance Navy uniform, her graying hair tied back in a severe bun. Her face was a roadmap of hard-won battles and sleepless nights, but her eyes were sharp and intelligent. "Welcome back to the land of the living, Mr. Kaelin," she said, her voice a low, gravelly alto. "I am Captain Eva Rostova of the Retribution. You and your crew gave us one hell of a show." "The fleet. Viridia," Kaelin managed, his own voice a dry rasp. "The hegemony fleet is shattered," Rostova confirmed, her expression grim. "We're mopping up the last of their disabled destroyers, but the flagship, the harmonious intent, is still intact. Crippled, but intact. And Prelate Xylar is refusing to surrender." A cold dread washed over Kaelin, overriding his physical pain. "He can't fight back, can he?" "He doesn't need to," Rostova said, her gaze hardening. "About 10 minutes ago, He activated something his ship's computer calls the Purification Protocol. My technicians, using the data you sent us, figured out what it is. He's rerouting his main reactor's power into a focused energy projector. He can't move his ship, but he can turn it into a cannon pointed directly at Viridia. He's going to scour the surface of the moon clean, a final, thoughtful act of erasing what he considers an imperfection. How long do we have? Kalen asked, already swinging his legs out of the medbay bed. 45 minutes, give or take. Rostova answered. We can't get close enough to stop him. My ships are shot to hell, and his point defense systems are still active. We can't board him, and we can't crack his hull before he fires. By the time the captain had finished her briefing, Anya was stirring, her eyes fluttering open with a groan. Zeth sat up a moment later, blinking slowly as if emerging from a long, complex dream. Kalen explained the situation, the words tumbling out in a rush, desperate torrent. The familiar feeling of hopelessness began to creep back in. They had won the battle, only to lose the war in the final moments. There is a way, Zeth said, his voice quiet but clear. His silver eyes, usually so full of melancholy, now held a sharp, analytical glint. His ship is perfect, and that has always been its flaw. The main power conduits and data nodes will be heavily shielded, but the tertiary systems, the maintenance shafts, the waste reclamation vents, they are the circulatory system of the ship. They are its hidden vulnerability. He would never expect an attack from within his own perfect machine. Anya was already on her feet, testing her weight. The stasis field around her arm dissolved with a soft hiss. You're talking about infiltration, a boarding action. The Alliance can't get you there, Rostova stated flatly. His point defense will shred any shuttle we launch. Kalen looked at the tactical display on the medbay wall. At the swirling debris field where the battle had taken place, a graveyard of both Hegemony and Alliance ships. It was a chaotic mess of shattered hulls and dead systems. It was a scavenger's paradise. We won't use a shuttle, Kalen said, the old, familiar instinct kicking in. We'll use junk. The plan was, like all their others, born of desperation and a flagrant disregard for safety protocols. They found a Hegemony escape pod, half shredded but with its core systems and short-range thrusters intact, drifting among the wreckage. Under Zeth's guidance, they used a repair skiff from the Retribution to patch its hull with mismatched plates and cold-weld the seals. It was ugly, a mockery of Ethelian design, but it would hold air. More importantly, its energy signature was faint and would be lost in the background radiation of the debris field. 20 minutes later, the three of them were crammed into the tight confines of the pod. Anya was at the controls, her touch light and precise as she navigated the treacherous maze of floating metal. Kalen watched on a flickering monitor as they approached the colossal, wounded form of the harmonious intent. Zeth, meanwhile, was murmuring to himself, tracing schematics in the air with his long fingers. There, he said, pointing to a small, unassuming maintenance hatch near the ship's ventral engineering section. That is a plasma coolant intake valve. It should be unshielded. With a soft clang that vibrated through their bones, the pod's magnetic clamps locked onto the flagship's hull. The interior of the harmonious intent was a surreal landscape of ordered destruction. The corridors were pristine white, but buckled and warped in places from the Alliance's railgun impacts. The emergency lighting cast long, geometrically perfect shadows. The only sound was the low, electric hum of a dying god. They moved like ghosts through the silent machine, Anya in the lead, a salvaged plasma rifle held at the ready, automated defense drones, small, spherical machines of lethal efficiency, occasionally slid out of wall panels to intercept them. Anya dispatched them with a brutal, close-quarters efficiency that spoke of a deep, personal rage. They finally reached the main access conduit that led to the bridge. As the door hissed open, they saw him. Prelate Xylar stood before the main command console, his back to them. The view screen in front of him showed the surface of Viridia, a targeting reticle slowly counting down in one corner. He was dressed in immaculate white robes, and he seemed completely calm, an island of serenity in his failing masterpiece. The heretic, the brute, and the scavenger, Xylar said without turning around, his voice echoing in the cavernous bridge. The embodiment of the very chaos I sought to cleanse. You have only proven my point. Your victory is a stain, an ugly, random spasm in a universe that craves order. The universe doesn't crave order, Szeth said, stepping forward, his voice ringing with a conviction Kalen had never heard from him before. It craves life, and life is messy. It is chaotic and imperfect and asymmetrical. Your perfection is a sterile, beautiful tomb. We are alive because we are imperfect, because we can adapt and break and rebuild ourselves into something stronger. Xylar finally turned, and in his hand he held a device that shimmered with golden light. A lovely sentiment. It will make a fitting epitaph. He lunged, not at Szeth, but at Anya, moving with a speed that was utterly inhuman. The fight was short and brutal. Anya met his charge, her plasma rifle useless at such close range. It became a blur of motion, the cold fury of the human survivor against the serene, deadly precision of the Aethelian zealot. While they fought, Kalen and Szeth rushed to the console. The countdown showed less than 2 minutes. I can't shut it down, Szeth exclaimed, his fingers flying over the holographic controls. The firing sequence is locked in a closed loop, powered directly by the reactor. Then don't shut it down, Kalen said, his eyes darting from the countdown to the main power schematic on the display. He pointed to a glowing node at the center. Redirect it. Make the weapon fire inward. Szeth's eyes widened in understanding. Feed the serpent its own tail. It is grotesquely poetic. He began to reroute the energy pathways, creating a feedback loop of catastrophic proportions. A loud crack echoed through the bridge. Anya stood panting, her face bleeding from a shallow cut. At her feet, Xylar lay motionless, his golden energy device shattered. She had won. Time to go, she grunted. Alarms, loud and discordant, began to blare throughout the ship, a sound the Aethelian crew had probably never heard before. They sprinted from the bridge, the hum of the dying ship rising to a deafening shriek around them. They scrambled back into their battered escape pod and kicked off from the hull, just as a wave of internal explosions ripped through the flagship. The harmonious intent did not explode in a chaotic fireball. Instead, it imploded. The energy beam, firing into its own core, created a singularity that folded the ship in on itself. It shrank, its elegant lines collapsing, until with a final silent flash of impossible light, it was simply gone. The sky over Viridia was clear. Kalen stood on a small, grassy hill, the unfamiliar feeling of solid ground beneath his feet. The colony's biodomes shimmered in the distance, their lights coming back on one by one. A woman with his same dark hair and her own stubborn jaw ran toward him. And for the first time in 10 years, Kalen embraced his sister, Ilara. Later, the three of them stood together, watching the Alliance cruisers in a low, victorious orbit. Anya had been offered a commission, a chance to keep fighting. She had accepted, but her rage was gone, replaced by a quiet, fierce protectiveness. She had found not a good death, but a reason to live. Zeth was surrounded by Viridian engineers, excitedly pointing out the flaws in their fusion generators and sketching out beautifully heretical improvements on a datapad. He was home. Captain Rostova had gifted Kalen a new ship. It was a retired Alliance patrol vessel, solid and reliable. It wasn't the Drifter. It had no soul, no history of mismatched parts and desperate gambles. When as he looked up at the stars, he knew that wouldn't last long. He was a scavenger, after all, and he knew, better than anyone, that the most broken things could be rebuilt into something far stronger than anything that had ever been perfect.